The cold London air carried an eerie stillness that morning, the kind of silence that only precedes a storm. Outside Buckingham Palace, the flags barely moved, the sky a heavy gray blanket threatening to split open at any moment. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Inside, the corridors buzzed not with the usual rehearsed calm of royal routine, but with whispers, urgent, panicked, disbelieving. Something had shifted, something irreversible. At first, only a handful of senior aides knew what had just landed in Prince William's private office. A sealed dossier hand-delivered by a courier from an external medical institution. The envelope bore no royal insignia, no familiar watermark. Yet its contents, the moment William's trembling hands slid it open, would unravel the very foundation of the House of Windsor. Inside were DNA results. Not speculation, not rumor. Cold, clinical, irrefutable truth. A truth that would tear two brothers apart forever. William stared at the document, eyes scanning the lines again and again, as though repetition might somehow alter the words. But they remained the same, scientific, sterile, devastating. Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana, the beloved children of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, shared no biological link to Harry. None. The samples didn't match. The findings were certified, cross-verified, and legally validated. It wasn't a clerical error or a tabloid fabrication. It was real. And in that moment, the future King of England felt something he hadn't felt in years: sheer, unfiltered disbelief. For a long while, William didn't move. The room seemed to close in around him. Memories of his brother flooded his mind. The laughter, the rebellion, the heartbreaks they'd shared since childhood. He'd defended Harry through countless controversies. He'd stood firm, even when the press painted them as rivals. But this was beyond rivalry. It was betrayal layered in tragedy. How could something like this happen? Who knew about it? And most terrifyingly, what would it mean for the royal bloodline itself? He pressed his palms against the desk, the sound of the crumpling paper echoing like thunder in his mind. His heart raced as he realized what the implications were. If Harry wasn't the biological father of his own children, then everything, titles, lineage, succession, fell into question. The monarchy, an institution built on blood and legitimacy, could not overlook this. And William knew that, as heir to the throne, he had a duty, a burden he hadn't asked for, but one he could not ignore. Hours later, as the palace staff gathered for an emergency meeting, the atmosphere was thick with dread. Confidentiality was absolute. Mobile phones were confiscated, doors locked, and guards stationed in every hallway. Only a handful of trusted advisors and senior family members were allowed in the room. Charles was notably absent, recovering privately from his ongoing medical treatment, leaving William as acting head in this delicate crisis. "What's this about, William?" one senior aide asked cautiously. William didn't respond immediately. He stood near the large oak table, the document folder in front of him, his jaw set. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but cold. "We've received medical confirmation regarding Harry's children. The results, they're not his." Gasps filled the room. Aides exchanged glances, disbelief etched across their faces. One whispered, "That's impossible." But William simply shook his head. "I wish it were." He explained the chain of custody, the independent verification, and the institution's reputation, leaving no room for doubt. Then came the heavier part, what it meant for the monarchy. Titles had been granted under the assumption of royal bloodline continuity. If that assumption was false, then the integrity of the entire system could be compromised. "This cannot leave this room until we act formally," William ordered. But action must be taken swiftly and decisively. Behind the closed doors, the conversation turned legal. Advisors debated precedent, consulting historical cases where illegitimacy had caused dynastic crises. The last time something remotely similar had happened, it had nearly sparked a constitutional collapse. But this was different. The world was watching, the press relentless, the institution fragile after years of scandals surrounding Harry and Meghan. And in that moment, William realized something chilling. Silence would destroy them faster than truth. Later that evening, as twilight fell over Windsor Castle, William sat alone by the window, looking out at the fading horizon. His phone buzzed incessantly. Private numbers, urgent calls, unanswered messages from his brother. He couldn't bring himself to pick up. What would he even say? How do you tell your own brother that the family's bloodline, the very thing they were born to protect, had been broken? He thought of his grandmother, the late Queen Elizabeth II, and how she would have handled such a scandal. She had endured everything from abdications to divorces, but even she had never faced something like this. This wasn't just a royal scandal. It was a personal earthquake that threatened to crumble everything she had built. When the clock struck 10, William made his decision. He summoned his communications director, his private secretary, and 2 senior advisors. "Prepare a statement," he said quietly, his tone steady but sorrowful. "Effective immediately, pending verification of lineage, the royal titles of Archie and Lilibet will be suspended." The room fell into stunned silence. Even his advisors, accustomed to crises, hesitated. "Are you sure, Your Royal Highness?" one asked cautiously. William nodded slowly. "This isn't about punishment. It's about preservation. Until we understand the full truth, the institution must stand firm." He paused, exhaling deeply. "And it's what my grandmother would have done." The statement, though brief, was unprecedented in modern royal history. Within hours, it was hand-delivered to the press office under strict embargo. But as always, nothing within palace walls stays secret for long. By dawn, whispers had reached journalists across London. Phones began ringing in newsrooms. Editors demanded confirmations. And by mid-morning, the story broke, with headlines that screamed chaos. Prince William revokes Archie and Lilibet's titles amid DNA scandal. Social media exploded. Hashtags trended worldwide. Millions debated, speculated, raged. Some called it betrayal. Others called it justice. But one thing was certain: the royal family was in crisis. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic in Montecito, Harry woke to a flurry of missed calls. He had no idea that, while he slept, the world had shifted under his feet. His children's names, once symbols of his defiance against the crown, were now stripped from official royal records. When he saw the headlines, his face went pale. He called William immediately. No answer. He called again. Still nothing. Then, finally, a message appeared from a private palace number. "William knows everything." Those 3 words shattered him. Harry felt his stomach twist as he tried to piece together what everything meant. His mind raced to every secret, every rumor, every argument. He turned to Meghan, who stood frozen by the kitchen counter, phone in hand, tears glistening in her eyes. "What did you do, Meg?" he whispered, his voice trembling. Meghan didn't answer right away. Her lips parted, but no words came out. There was only silence. Heavy, suffocating silence that carried more truth than words ever could. Back in London, William watched the fallout unfold. He hadn't slept. He hadn't eaten. His only focus was containing the damage, preserving what little trust remained in the monarchy. For every message of support he received, there were 10 more condemning him as heartless, vindictive, or jealous. But William didn't care about optics anymore. He cared about truth. He recalled the moment his mother, Princess Diana, once told him that truth was the hardest gift the world could offer, because it destroys before it heals. And now, as he sat in the same palace where his mother's tears had once fallen, he finally understood what she meant. The revelation wasn't just about Harry's children. It was about the very soul of the royal family. Could an institution built on legacy survive when its foundations were tainted by deception? Could 2 brothers ever find peace again after this? Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, tracing slow trails down the palace windows. William turned away from the view, shoulders heavy with the weight of history. He knew this was only the beginning, the calm before a storm that would test every ounce of loyalty, love, and power left within the royal bloodline. And deep down, he sensed something darker. That this discovery, however shocking, might not even be the whole truth. Because hidden within the same dossier, beneath the DNA results and the sterile medical terminology, was a sealed appendix. A single page marked, "Confidential, Source Documentation." William hadn't opened it yet. He didn't know who ordered the tests or how the samples were obtained. He only knew one thing. Someone somewhere had known about this long before he did. And that realization sent chills down his spine. As the palace clock struck midnight, William rose from his desk and looked at the unopened page lying there like a ticking time bomb. The storm outside intensified, lightning flashing across the London skyline. He exhaled slowly, staring at the envelope. "Tomorrow," he whispered. "I'll face it tomorrow." But tomorrow would bring something far worse than he could ever imagine, because when the truth finally emerged about who had triggered the DNA test, it would ignite a royal war unlike anything the world had ever seen. The morning after the royal statement hit the world, the palace was in chaos. Outside its ancient gates, the crowd had doubled overnight. Reporters, photographers, and stunned citizens pressed against the barriers, their voices rising in a frenzy of disbelief. Inside, however, a different kind of silence reigned, the tense, brittle kind that follows catastrophe. Phones rang, aides whispered, doors slammed. But beneath all the noise, there was fear. Quiet, suffocating fear that no one dared to voice aloud. In a secure wing of Kensington Palace, William sat in his private office again, staring at a flurry of news reports spread across the table. Every network, every headline screamed the same story. Royal scandal. Titles stripped. DNA bombshell rocks the monarchy. He hadn't even had time to process the personal implications. The institution came first, it always did. His press secretary was pacing, muttering about the unprecedented level of global attention. "Sir, we've received over 2,000 press inquiries since dawn. American outlets are demanding interviews. Australian news has gone live 24 hours straight. And Meghan's team." William cut him off with a glance. "Meghan's team will do what they always do, spin it. But we're not going to play that game." Still, the words barely left his mouth before an aide rushed in, holding a tablet. "You'll want to see this, sir." On the screen was a leaked email, anonymous and signed, but damning. It claimed to reveal how the DNA results were first obtained. The message stated that an insider at a private California clinic had been approached by a concerned royal associate months earlier, offering a significant sum for a discreet genetic test. The sender had attached a copy of a receipt and timestamps. The leak was already spreading across social media. William felt his chest tighten. Someone within their own circle had done this. Someone close enough to access Harry's family. Someone bold enough to commission secret testing without either parent's consent. And now that information was out, threatening to drag the palace into legal and ethical firestorms that could scorch everything in their path. He rose from his seat, his mind spinning. "Find out where that email originated," he ordered sharply. "Every trace, every server, every contact. I want names." As his team scrambled to comply, William retreated to the window. The sky outside was still thick and gray, mirroring the heaviness inside him. He had thought removing the titles was the hardest decision he'd ever make. He was wrong. This was worse. Because now, it wasn't just about protecting the monarchy. It was about uncovering who had orchestrated a betrayal from within. Across the Atlantic, in Montecito, Harry's world had shattered into chaos. He had barely slept. Paparazzi lined the streets outside their gated mansion. Drones hovered above, and online speculation spiraled out of control. Some accused Meghan of deception, others claimed it was a setup, and a few insisted the entire royal family had fabricated the scandal to destroy her. Harry sat on the edge of the couch, phone in hand, scrolling through endless headlines that felt like daggers. Meghan's lies exposed. DNA scandal threatens royal bloodline. Every headline painted him as a fool, a man who had been played not only by the media but by the woman he'd sacrificed his entire world for. He turned to Meghan, who was sitting quietly at the far end of the room, her face pale, eyes red from crying. "Tell me it's not true," he said, voice breaking. Tell me this isn't real. She looked up slowly, shaking her head. Harry, I don't know what to say. I never thought something like this could happen. He clenched his fists. Then who did this? Who ordered those tests? Who gave them access to our children's samples? You think this is some kind of mistake? They had DNA, Meg. DNA. She looked away, silent. And that silence cut deeper than any words. Meanwhile, back in London, the investigation into the leak had already begun. A cybersecurity team traced the anonymous email to a secure offshore server. But what they found next made William's blood run cold. The message had originated from a London IP address tied to an encrypted palace device. It wasn't an outsider. It was someone inside the royal system. William called an emergency meeting. When the senior aides arrived, he wasted no time. "We have a breach," he said bluntly. "The leak didn't come from California. It came from here, from one of us." The room froze. Eyes darted around. No one spoke. One aide finally whispered, "But why? Who would risk everything like that?" William's jaw tightened. "That's what we're going to find out." As the investigation deepened, suspicions began to rise. Old rivalries resurfaced. Private emails were seized, staff accounts suspended, and rumors rippled through every corridor. But as the pieces began to fall into place, one name kept surfacing. A name William hadn't expected. A long-serving staff member who had once been deeply loyal to their late grandmother, Queen Elizabeth. Someone who believed the royal bloodline had to remain pure, no matter the cost. It was a quiet, middle-aged woman named Margaret Turner, an archivist who had spent decades preserving family records and genealogical documents. She had always kept to herself, devoted to the institution, fiercely protective of its legacy. But her loyalty had taken a dark turn. Months earlier, after overhearing private discussions about Meghan's pregnancy and timeline inconsistencies, she had taken it upon herself to protect the crown. Without authorization, she had contacted a private lab and arranged for comparative testing using archival genetic data stored from prior medical screenings. Her intent, she later confessed, was not malice. It was duty. She believed that if there were any doubts about lineage, they had to be resolved before the children assumed royal status. When William confronted her privately, she wept. "I only wanted to preserve the truth, sir. Her Majesty would have done the same." William's voice was steady, but his hands trembled. "You had no right, Margaret. None. You've torn this family apart." She nodded through tears. "The truth tears, sir. But lies destroy." Those words haunted him long after she was dismissed from service under strict confidentiality orders. Yet even with the truth about the leak exposed, the damage was irreversible. The world now knew too much. The palace's attempt to contain the story had only fueled more questions. How long had William known? Had Charles approved the suspension? Was the monarchy hiding even more scandals? By week's end, the public outrage had reached a fever pitch. Protesters gathered outside Buckingham Palace demanding transparency. American journalists camped outside Montecito demanding Meghan's response. And in between those two worlds, between royal duty and personal loyalty, stood William and Harry, no longer brothers, but adversaries in a war neither had chosen. The tension exploded when a private recording surfaced online. The audio, captured during a heated phone call between the two brothers, revealed fragments of their confrontation. Harry's voice was raw with anger. "You had no right, William. You think you're protecting the crown, but you've destroyed what little family we had left." William's voice, cold and weary, responded, "You destroyed it yourself, Harry. I just exposed what was already true." The recording went viral within hours. Millions heard it, dissected it, argued over who was right and who was cruel. But within the palace, William felt something crumble inside him. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't vindication. It was grief. Grief for a brother who had once stood beside him in laughter and loyalty, and now stood across from him as a stranger. Meanwhile, deep within the British Parliament, quiet discussions began between legal advisors and constitutional experts. Could the royal family withstand another public breakdown? Should there be a formal inquiry into the legitimacy of the titles? The situation had become more than a family matter. It was now a constitutional crisis. And while politicians debated the monarchy's future, Meghan made her own move. Late one evening, her team released a carefully crafted statement through American media outlets. It read, "The recent accusations regarding the paternity of our children are not only false but deeply damaging. We will be taking legal action against all parties involved in this invasion of privacy and defamation." But William wasn't surprised. He knew the PR war had just begun. What he didn't know, however, was that Meghan's team had quietly gathered documents. Documents that could change everything once again. Because hidden among her private records was an old communication between Harry and a well-known Hollywood physician, written during her first pregnancy. In that email, Harry had expressed urgent concerns about security and privacy at the time, even suggesting using a private surrogate under confidentiality to protect Meghan. When William opened the sealed appendix, the room seemed to shrink around him. The paper inside wasn't official like the rest of the report. It was a personal note attached by the testing institution, a memorandum addressed to the client. His eyes darted to the signature line, expecting a name from the medical center. Instead, what he found made his breath catch. The signature wasn't from a scientist, a physician, or a lawyer. It was from someone who should never have had access to royal medical data, Marcus Anderson. For a few seconds, William couldn't process it. He knew the name well. Marcus wasn't just anyone. He was Meghan Markle's longtime confidant, her glamorous, ever-present companion from her Toronto days, a man with deep ties in Hollywood and powerful connections across the entertainment world. He had been with Meghan long before the royal marriage and had been quietly mentioned in palace briefings as a potential influence. But this? His name on an appendix linked to DNA testing involving the royal children? That was an earthquake. The memorandum was short and chillingly direct. Per your instructions, the samples have been authenticated and transferred to secure custody. Verification complete. Awaiting further direction, M.A. William's stomach twisted. Per your instructions. Whose instructions? Marcus's own? Or someone else's? Perhaps Meghan's? He read the message again. Then again, his pulse racing faster each time. If Marcus had been involved in ordering or managing the DNA tests, that meant the truth had been known, or at least suspected, months before the palace found out. It wasn't an accident. It was a controlled operation, quietly managed behind closed Hollywood doors. He dropped the page on his desk and stared at the floor. Suddenly, every detail began to connect. The unusual secrecy surrounding Meghan's pregnancies, her insistence on American medical care instead of British royal doctors, her reluctance to share certain records with the palace. At the time, it had seemed like stubborn independence. Now, it looked like something else entirely: premeditated concealment. William stood, pacing the room, his thoughts sharp as glass. If Marcus Anderson had helped orchestrate this, it wasn't just about private choices. It was about image control, publicity, and manipulation. Hollywood PR strategy had collided with royal duty. And that meant every public appearance, every perfectly staged photo of Harry and Meghan's family, could have been part of a larger narrative, one built on deception. He picked up his phone and called the palace intelligence liaison, a man named Simon Hayward, known for his discretion and quiet efficiency. "Simon," William said, his voice low, "I need everything you can find on Marcus Anderson's recent activity, his travel, communications, and financial movements. I don't care how deep you have to go." There was a pause on the line. "Understood, sir. May I ask?" "No questions," William snapped softly. "Just find out who he's been working for." That night, William couldn't sleep. The more he thought about it, the clearer the pattern became. Marcus had always been in Meghan's orbit, a kind of handler who appeared whenever things threatened to spiral out of control. During their transition to America, it was Marcus who introduced them to media consultants, PR fixers, and corporate sponsors. It was Marcus who smoothed over the early Netflix deals. And it was Marcus who had quietly vanished from public view just weeks before the DNA scandal broke. William knew he was chasing something far darker than a family secret. The next morning, as dawn broke over London, Simon arrived with a confidential file. "We traced Marcus's movements over the last 6 months," he said, setting the folder on the table. "He traveled multiple times between Los Angeles, New York, and Toronto, but one trip stands out. 2 weeks before the tests were conducted, he spent 3 days in Zurich." "Zurich?" William frowned. "Why there?" Simon flipped a page and pointed to a highlighted line. "He met with a private investment group that specializes in crisis management and narrative control, the kind used by politicians and high-profile celebrities during scandals. We believe he was coordinating a contingency plan." William's heart sank. "You mean he was preparing for this, before it even went public?" "Yes, sir. He knew it would break eventually. The plan was to shape the story before the palace could respond." William sat back, the realization hitting him like ice. Marcus hadn't been reacting to a scandal. He'd been anticipating it. That meant this wasn't spontaneous chaos. It was a premeditated defense strategy. Meanwhile, across the ocean, in the golden hills of Montecito, Harry was spiraling. Every news outlet dissected his family's life. Every pundit debated his marriage. He'd reached out to Meghan's Hollywood circle for help, but even they were growing silent. Marcus, once his wife's constant friend, hadn't returned a single call. Late one night, Harry drove alone, winding through the dark California roads until he stopped at the beach. He sat on the sand, the ocean roaring like distant thunder, and for the first time he allowed the anger to surface. He thought about his mother, how she'd been hounded by press lies, manipulated by people she trusted, and ultimately destroyed by exposure. Now it felt like the same curse had returned, disguised as truth. When he got home, Meghan was waiting. Her eyes were red, but her voice was composed. "We have to fight this, Harry. We can't let them define the story. We'll release the documents. We'll tell people the truth. Our truth." He hesitated. "And what is that, Meghan? What truth are we telling?" Her expression flickered, just for a moment. "The truth that this is an invasion of privacy, that the palace overstepped, that this is bigger than DNA." Harry turned away. "You mean bigger than the children?" Her silence again was deafening. In London, William's investigation reached a breakthrough. The Zurich connection had yielded something unexpected, a payment trail. A large sum had been transferred from an account linked to a California-based PR firm called Aurora Strategies, known for representing controversial celebrities in crisis. The recipient, Marcus Anderson. When investigators dug deeper, they found that the same firm had handled the early stages of Meghan and Harry's Netflix production deals, and had even drafted legal language for potential narrative control regarding personal family matters. William's blood ran cold as he realized what that meant. This wasn't just about image. It was about control over truth itself. Someone had anticipated a scandal involving the children and had built a legal shield months before it erupted. He confronted his chief of communications that evening. "They knew," William said. "They knew, and they planned the entire response in advance. Marcus, the firm, all of them. This wasn't an accident. It was orchestrated." The communications chief exhaled slowly. "If this comes out publicly, sir, it could redefine how the monarchy is seen forever. The public won't forgive deception at this scale. Not from them, not from us." William looked out the window, the city lights flickering in the distance. "It's not about forgiveness anymore," he said quietly. "It's about truth, even if it destroys us." Days later, as investigators pieced together the final timeline, a second revelation emerged, one even more shocking. Among Marcus's encrypted correspondence recovered from Zurich was a confidential message sent to a US-based attorney. The subject line read, "Custodial Agreement, Private Protection." Attached was a draft contract outlining guardianship terms between Meghan Markle, the unnamed biological father, and a private trust fund. William read the document in stunned silence. The children's biological lineage wasn't just a mystery. It had been legally managed. The contract implied that an agreement had been in place to protect the identities and financial interests of all parties involved. The father's name was redacted, but an unintentional clue remained, an email footer identifying the sender's company. It was a Hollywood management firm connected to an actor who had once worked with Meghan during her Suits-era years in Toronto. William froze. The name wasn't just familiar. It was infamous. A man whose public history with Meghan had once made tabloid gossip columns and who had mysteriously disappeared from the spotlight around the same time she began dating Harry. Suddenly, it all made sense. The secrecy, the media control, the obsession with privacy. It wasn't just about protecting their image. It was about burying a truth so explosive it could end their family's public credibility forever. William closed the folder slowly, his jaw tightening. The monarchy had survived wars, scandals, divorces, and betrayals. But this was different. This wasn't a tabloid story. It was a carefully built deception spanning continents, contracts, and reputations. He leaned back, exhaling heavily. "This goes beyond Harry and Meghan," he muttered to himself. Someone wanted this truth hidden forever, and someone else wanted it found. Outside, rain lashed against the palace windows once again, thunder rumbling across the London sky. He could feel it in his bones. This wasn't the end of the revelation. It was only the beginning of something much darker. And as he stared at the dim light flickering across the sealed folder, he knew there was only one way forward. The monarchy had to confront the full truth, no matter how devastating it would be. But before he could act, his phone buzzed. A private message from an unknown number contained a single sentence. "You're not the only one who knows, William. The world will see everything by Sunday." He froze, staring at the screen as the realization sank in. The leak wasn't over. Someone was about to release the hidden contract. And when they did, no crown on earth could protect what was left of his family. By Saturday night, a strange calm had fallen over London, the deceptive kind that creeps in before disaster strikes. The palace corridors were quiet, the press courtyard empty, and the royal guards moved like ghosts through the drizzle. But inside the communications wing, tension buzzed like electricity. Everyone knew something was coming. William's mysterious text message, "The world will see everything by Sunday," had thrown the entire royal apparatus into panic mode. Emergency security teams were dispatched, servers were scanned for breaches, and every external contact was scrutinized. Yet no one could pinpoint the source. Whoever had sent that message wasn't bluffing. By midnight, the first signs of the coming storm appeared. A well-known American gossip blogger posted a cryptic tweet. "Tomorrow morning will change how you see the royal family forever. Remember this name, Marcus Anderson." The tweet gained thousands of shares within minutes. Then another post appeared from a Hollywood journalist. "Confidential files connecting Meghan Markle's inner circle to unauthorized DNA testing are about to surface. Global exclusives dropping 9 a.m. Eastern." The palace went into lockdown. At 3 a.m. London time, William was still awake, pacing his office like a caged lion. His advisors huddled around the large television screens that displayed real-time social media feeds. The internet had already exploded with speculation. Some insisted the leak was fake. Others believed it was a coordinated takedown. But William knew it was real, because he'd seen the documents with his own eyes. "Sir, we need to prepare a response," one aide urged. "We can't wait until morning. Once the files drop, we'll be reacting instead of controlling the story." William's expression was grim. There is no controlling this story anymore. He turned toward the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. "We've spent generations controlling the narrative. Maybe it's time the truth tells itself." When the clock struck 9 in New York, 2 in the afternoon in London, the world stopped. Every major news outlet interrupted programming. A breaking news alert flashed across screens. Confidential royal DNA documents leaked, source tied to Meghan Markle's Hollywood circle. Within minutes, millions of people were refreshing their phones, scrolling through PDF files that had appeared online. The leak was surgical. Whoever had orchestrated it had packaged everything: the original test results, Marcus Anderson's memo, the Zurich transactions, and the redacted guardianship contract. The files were stamped with digital authenticity codes, leaving no doubt of their legitimacy. And the timing was deliberate. Sunday morning in the U.S., when traffic and engagement peaked. For the first hour, chaos reigned. Anchors stammered through live broadcasts. Analysts debated legality, and social media drowned in shock. Hashtags like #RoyalDNA, #AndersonLeak, and #NotHarry'sChildren trended worldwide. Then came the footage. A short, grainy video clip surfaced from an encrypted cloud folder, recorded secretly at what appeared to be a Los Angeles meeting. The room was dimly lit, but the voices were unmistakable. Marcus Anderson's smooth Canadian accent. A woman's voice, calm, deliberate, painfully familiar. Meghan Markle. "Everything has to stay off record," Meghan's voice said. "The contract ensures discretion. If the truth ever comes out, the agreement protects everyone involved. We can't afford royal interference." The clip ended abruptly, but the damage was done. William's advisors froze as they watched the footage replayed across every network. No one spoke. The silence was suffocating. One finally broke it. "Sir, we need to deny authenticity immediately." William shook his head slowly. "And what happens when they prove it's real? We can't lie our way through this." By evening, London was engulfed in frenzy. Protesters gathered outside the palace gates holding signs that read, "Transparency now," and "The Crown lied." Reporters camped out for statements. Helicopters hovered overhead. And in Montecito, paparazzi lined every street near Harry and Meghan's home, shouting questions that cut like blades. Harry and Meghan stayed inside, blinds drawn. The atmosphere in their mansion was suffocating. Panic mixed with fury. Meghan sat at the dining table surrounded by laptops and legal documents, her phone lighting up with calls from her publicist, attorney, and friends. "This is a coordinated smear campaign," she said sharply. "They've fabricated everything." Harry stood by the window, jaw clenched, fists tight. "The video, Meghan. They have you on tape. You can't deny that." Her eyes flashed. "It's edited. It's taken out of context." "Then what's the context?" he demanded. "Tell me what's real." For a long moment she didn't answer. The silence stretched until Harry turned away, shaking his head. Across the ocean, in London, William faced a different kind of storm, one of politics and tradition colliding head-on. Parliament had summoned an emergency session to discuss the implications of the leak. The question was brutal but unavoidable. If royal titles are based on bloodline, and the bloodline is compromised, what does that mean for the monarchy's legitimacy? William sat in a dim antechamber waiting for the session to begin, the faint echo of voices from the hall beyond the doors. His private secretary leaned close. "Sir, the Prime Minister is insisting on a clear statement tonight. They want to stabilize public confidence before the markets open tomorrow." William nodded absently. His mind wasn't on the economy. It was on Harry, on the children, on the irreparable damage between brothers who once shared everything. He remembered their childhood, chasing each other through palace gardens, laughing under the shadow of duty. He remembered the night after their mother's funeral, sitting side by side in silence. She had told them once, "You will be each other's strength when I'm gone." Now they were each other's undoing. That evening, the palace released an official statement, carefully worded, painfully restrained. The royal household acknowledges the publication of unauthorized and sensitive materials concerning private family matters. Investigations are underway. His Royal Highness Prince William emphasizes the Crown's commitment to integrity and truth. Further comment will follow pending legal consultation. It was a statement designed to calm, but it only poured fuel on the fire. By nightfall, American networks were broadcasting special coverage titled "The Royal DNA Scandal: Blood, Lies, and Power." Commentators dissected every frame of the leaked video. Was Meghan confessing or protecting someone else? Who was behind the Zurich payment? Why had Marcus Anderson gone into hiding? Meanwhile, British tabloids had found their villain. Front-page headlines screamed betrayal. Hollywood betrays the Crown. Markle's secret network exposed. But amid the noise, one headline from a respected investigative outlet stood out. Anonymous insider claims DNA leak was meant to protect, not destroy. William's advisors brought him the article the next morning. quoted a source who claimed to be part of the original Zurich team. Someone who said the testing had been initiated not by Marcus, but by an unknown royal intermediary who had concerns about potential manipulation of lineage data. William's pulse quickened as he read the line again. An unknown royal intermediary. Could someone inside the family have triggered this chain of events long before he knew anything? His thoughts spiraled. Charles was ill but not inactive. Camilla had long distrusted Meghan and Princess and had quietly voiced concerns about deviations from tradition. Any of them could have acted behind his back. But there was something else in the phrasing, manipulation of lineage data, that sounded like someone believed the deception went even deeper than paternity. Before he could process it further, Simon Hayward entered the room with grim news. "Sir, there's been another leak, this one from within Parliament. A confidential memo suggests the government is considering an inquiry into the royal bloodline verification process." William's head snapped up. "They're questioning the legitimacy of the entire succession?" Simon nodded. "If the monarchy's legal foundation is based on hereditary continuity, they may push for an independent audit of lineage records, including yours and your children's." For a moment, William just stared at him. The thought was unthinkable. If Parliament began probing royal DNA, it would dismantle centuries of privacy and tradition. The monarchy wouldn't just be wounded, it would be exposed, naked before the world. He sank back into his chair, exhaustion etched across his face. "They're tearing the crown apart," he murmured. Simon's voice was low. "Maybe the crown was already cracked, sir. The leaks just showed where it broke." Outside, thunder rolled through the London sky once again. The palace gates were surrounded by reporters, their lights flashing like lightning. Across the world, the story dominated every screen, every conversation, every thought. And in Montecito, Harry sat on the back porch staring at the sunset, a single envelope in his lap, the same contract that had now gone public. He turned it over slowly. It was his father's, King Charles's initials. The realization hit him like a wave. The entire arrangement, the private testing, the guardianship contract, the secrecy, had been overseen by his father. Charles had known. Harry's hands trembled as he tore open the envelope and read the note inside, written in his father's careful, fading script. "My son, when you read this, you will understand. I did what I must to protect you, and them. Truth isn't always mercy. Forgive me." The page slipped from Harry's fingers, carried away by the wind. In that moment, he understood everything, and realized that this was never about Meghan, Marcus, or even William. It had always been about the monarchy's survival. And now, the truth had escaped its cage. As the sun sank into the California horizon and midnight approached in London, the monarchy stood at the edge of collapse. The brothers, once united in grief, were now divided by blood itself. But the storm was far from over, because the next revelation waiting to surface would make even DNA look like a footnote. Something buried deep in the royal archives, a century-old secret, was about to reemerge. And when it did, the crown's entire history would be rewritten. The night after the Sunday leak, Buckingham Palace didn't sleep. Every corridor glowed dimly under emergency lighting. Aides whispered over folders marked classified, and guards rotated posts as if the palace itself were preparing for battle. The world outside was still in uproar, but inside, a colder fear had taken hold, not of scandal, but of revelation. In the center of it all sat Prince William, his desk littered with files, news clippings, and cups of untouched tea. He hadn't eaten in 36 hours. The air in the room felt thick with the ghosts of his ancestors, portraits of monarchs staring down at him with disapproval, as if centuries of legacy now weighed directly on his shoulders. Then, just after 2 in the morning, a knock came at the door. Simon Hayward entered, his expression grave. "Sir, We've just been alerted by the Royal Archive Department. There's been a breach. William straightened instantly. What kind of breach? Digital and physical, Simon replied. Someone accessed restricted records in the private archive, specifically lineage documentation dating back over 100 years. The logs show an entry at midnight. No authorization request. The intruder used an internal access code. William frowned. Who still has those codes? Only senior archivists and blood-verified royals, Simon said quietly. A chill ran through the room. Without another word, William grabbed his coat. We're going down there. The Royal Archive sat beneath the palace in a maze of stone corridors and steel doors. A place few had seen, even among staff. As they descended, the air grew colder, the silence heavier. When they reached the final gate, the biometric lock blinked red. The system had been tampered with. Inside, the vast room was dimly lit, its shelves stretching endlessly, filled with boxes labeled by reign, lineage, and correspondence. But one section stood open, a table at the far end, strewn with scattered papers. An elderly curator stood trembling beside it. Your Highness, I tried to stop them, she whispered. They left before I could call security. Who? William demanded. The woman hesitated. I believe it was Princess Anne. The words hit him like a hammer. His aunt, the family's most loyal guardian of tradition. He took a step forward. What did she take? The curator gestured to the table. Not much. Just one file, the lineage ledger from 1914. The copy we keep under seal. William's pulse quickened. The 1914 ledger was one of the oldest and most sensitive records in existence. It contained direct bloodline documentation from King George V's generation, the genetic cornerstone on which all subsequent royal legitimacy was built. If that ledger had been taken or altered, it could rewrite the monarchy's entire foundation. He turned to Simon. Pull every copy. Back it up. I want every page authenticated. But Simon was already holding something in his hand. A single loose sheet that had been left behind on the table. She didn't take everything, he said, handing it over. William took the page. It was yellowed with age, the ink faded but legible. It contained a set of handwritten annotations, marginal notes alongside the official record of birth certificates. His eyes scanned the entries until he reached one name circled in red pencil. Prince Edward of York, his great-grandfather. Next to it, in handwriting that looked distinctly different, was a single line that froze him where he stood. Confirmed discrepancy. Paternal substitution under directive of King George V. He read it again. Paternal substitution. His mouth went dry. You're telling me, he said slowly, that the man listed as our ancestor might not have been a true Windsor? Simon nodded grimly. If these notes are authentic, sir, the royal bloodline may have been altered over a century ago. Every generation since, including yours, could be descending from a concealed branch. William's mind reeled. It meant the monarchy's claim to legitimacy, every crown, every oath, every title, might have been built on a cover-up. He sat heavily in a nearby chair, the paper trembling in his hands. Why would Anne take this? Simon hesitated. Maybe she wanted to verify it herself. Or maybe she already knew. Outside, thunder cracked again, echoing through the underground chambers like a drumbeat of history itself. The next morning, while the world continued devouring headlines about the DNA scandal, a quieter story began to unfold inside the palace. Princess Anne had returned before dawn, escorted by security, calm and composed. When William confronted her in the Queen's private study, she didn't deny it. I took it because you needed to see the truth before it's too late, she said. The truth? William demanded. You mean to tell me our entire bloodline could be false? And looked at him steadily. Not false, redirected. There was a time, William, when protecting the monarchy required choices that would seem unthinkable today. In 1914, one of our ancestors, the real father of Prince Edward, was not royal by blood. The king concealed it to preserve the throne. William's voice dropped to a whisper. Who was he? And handed him a faded envelope. Inside was a photograph. A man in military uniform, dark-haired, sharp-eyed, unmistakably not of Windsor appearance. On the back, a note read simply, Captain Henry Beecham, Household Cavalry. George V's wife, Queen Mary, was rumored to have had an affair during the Great War, and said quietly. The child born months later, Edward, was raised as royal, legitimized by decree, and the truth buried. That's where the substitution began. Every generation since has carried the appearance of continuity, but genetically, the Windsor line diverged over a century ago. William felt dizzy. You're saying that none of us are legitimate heirs? Anne's gaze didn't waver. I'm saying legitimacy is an illusion, William. The monarchy survives because people believe in the idea, not the blood. He stared at her, stunned. And you chose now to reveal this? While the entire world is tearing us apart over bloodline authenticity. She sighed. Because once the public demands DNA transparency, this truth will surface anyway. Better you face it head-on than let Parliament expose it. William turned away, gripping the edge of the table. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of centuries pressed down between them, the ghosts of kings and queens whose secrets had built the institution he was now fighting to save. Finally, he looked back at her. Does father know? And hesitated. He suspects. That's why he allowed the private contract with Harry's children. He was trying to control how truth emerges, one scandal to distract from another. William's chest tightened. So all of this, Harry, Meghan, the DNA tests, they were pawns in a much older game. Anne's silence was answer enough. Hours later, William sat alone in the Royal Library, staring at the photograph of Captain Beecham. The resemblance was uncanny. Subtle features he'd seen in his own reflection, in his father's aging face. Maybe this was the real legacy. Not betrayal, but survival through deception. His phone buzzed. Another encrypted message, this time from an anonymous sender. Now you understand, don't you? The crown has always been built on lies. The question is, will you keep it standing? He read it twice, then deleted it instantly. Whoever was sending these messages knew too much. That evening, William gathered his senior advisors for a private meeting. The goal was no longer damage control, it was containment of truth itself. If the 1914 records leaked, the monarchy would implode. But as he debated options, legal injunctions, historical reinterpretations, redacted archives, one voice broke through the din. Simon leaned forward. Sir, you can't bury this. If we've learned anything from this crisis, it's that suppression fuels rebellion. If the public believes you're hiding more secrets, the institution will fall faster. William looked at him. So what are you suggesting? That I go on national television and announce that the British monarchy has been built on a century-old lie? Not a lie, Simon said carefully. A truth reframed. You could redefine legitimacy, make it about service, not blood. If the line began as an act of preservation, then perhaps this revelation can be reframed as resilience. William leaned back, the words echoing in his mind. Reframe the truth. Sounded simple, but he knew the public didn't forgive deception so easily. That night, while the palace debated strategy, another storm brewed beyond its walls. A whistleblower, believed to be a former palace historian, contacted an international news agency claiming to have evidence of the same 1914 ledger. Within hours, another countdown appeared online. Royal Archive files to be released in 48 hours. The palace had run out of time. William stood by the window as dawn broke, the first rays of light cutting through the rain. The city below was waking to another day of scandal, but his mind was somewhere else, on his grandmother, on his mother, on the unbroken chain of secrets that defined them all. He whispered under his breath, if truth destroys the crown, maybe it was never worth keeping. And yet, deep down, he knew he couldn't let it fall. He turned to Simon. Prepare a statement, not a denial, a reckoning. If the world is going to know, they'll hear it from me first. But before Simon could respond, another aide burst into the room, breathless. Sir, you need to see this. It's just been broadcast in America. William took the tablet, frowning. The screen showed a live feed from a major U.S. network. The anchor's expression was grave. "Breaking news," she said. "Newly uncovered documents suggest that the 1914 Royal Ledger may not be the oldest record in question. According to our sources, a second archive exists, a secret collection maintained by the late Queen Elizabeth herself, containing the monarchy's deepest family secrets." William's grip tightened on the tablet. "A second archive?" he murmured. The anchor continued, "This collection, known internally as the Black Ledger, allegedly contains unverified documents regarding the true origins of multiple royal bloodlines, including one entry labeled only as Project Albion." William's breath caught. He had heard that phrase once before, whispered years ago by an old advisor during his grandmother's reign, a rumor dismissed as palace folklore. Now it wasn't folklore anymore, and as the broadcast cut to a blurred image of a locked metal case marked with the royal cipher, William realized the truth he thought he had uncovered was only the beginning. The next secret, the one buried in the Black Ledger, was the one his grandmother had sworn would never see daylight. And if it did, it wouldn't just destroy the monarchy. It would rewrite the history of Britain itself. The word Albion echoed in William's head like a tolling bell. He had heard it only once before, years ago, whispered between two senior courtiers during a memorial dinner for Queen Elizabeth II. At the time, he'd dismissed it as myth, a code word for one of his grandmother's fabled contingency plans. But now, as the television screen flashed images of what journalists were calling the Black Ledger, that word, Albion, no longer felt mythical. It felt like a warning from the grave. The leak had detonated like a bomb. Within hours, the existence of a hidden royal archive had become global news. Networks ran non-stop segments titled, "The Queen's Secret Files." Headlines screamed questions. What did Queen Elizabeth hide? Why was Project Albion locked away? The world was demanding answers, and only one man could provide them. By dawn, William had convened a private council inside the Queen's former study, the same room where she'd once written her most classified correspondence. The air smelled faintly of old paper and lavender polish. On the table sat an unopened folder stamped with the insignia of the Royal Security Division. Simon Hayward stood beside him. "Sir, the reports are verified. The Black Ledger is real. It was maintained under direct instruction from the late Queen. Access restricted to two people, Her Majesty and the Lord Chamberlain. After her death, the contents were sealed in a vault beneath Windsor Castle." William exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. "And what exactly is in it?" Simon hesitated. "That's what we don't know, sir. But there's more. Someone's already requested access, through legal channels." "Who?" "Prince Harry." William froze. Simon continued. "He's filed a motion through his U.S. legal counsel citing familial right of disclosure. He's claiming the documents may relate to the recent DNA revelations, and that withholding them constitutes obstruction of lineage verification." William's jaw tightened. Harry was now using the law and the media to force open the monarchy's most dangerous secret. For the first time, William felt something shift inside him. Not anger, not grief, but something colder. Inevitability. The past was clawing its way back to the surface, and no wall of protocol could stop it. That evening, William traveled to Windsor under the cover of darkness, accompanied by Simon and two archivists. The vault beneath the castle was older than most of the palace itself. Stone walls, iron doors, and the faint hum of temperature regulators preserving centuries of fragile history. At its center stood a reinforced steel cabinet bearing the royal cipher ER2, engraved above the lock. The archivist stepped forward with trembling hands and entered a 10-digit code, followed by a palm scan. The lock clicked open. Inside lay a single black leather-bound volume, its cover embossed with the gold crown insignia. No title, no label, just the weight of silence. William reached for it. His fingers trembled slightly as he lifted it from the cabinet. It was heavier than expected, its leather cool and aged. When he opened the first page, the scent of dust and ink filled the air, and with it, a ghost of his grandmother's voice seemed to whisper from the past. The first entry was dated 1948, the year his father, Charles, was born. The handwriting was precise and elegant, unmistakably the Queen's. Project Albion initiated under royal decree, following disclosure of lineage discrepancy file 1914. Objective: to preserve constitutional stability by safeguarding royal continuity through controlled genetic substitution. William's heart pounded. Controlled genetic substitution. The words were clinical, but the meaning was horrifyingly clear. He turned the page. More entries followed, written over decades, records of meetings, directives, and coded references to medical institutions. The deeper he read, the more chilling the pattern became. Albion wasn't just a secret, it was a program. A contingency designed to quietly replace or adjust royal bloodlines to maintain genetic continuity when natural lineage was compromised. It wasn't just his generation or his great-grandfather's. The process had been repeated multiple times over the past century. Quietly, scientifically, strategically, his voice broke the silence. They manufactured royal blood. Simon looked stunned. You mean, engineered? William nodded slowly, eyes still on the pages. Every time a scandal, an affair, or a legitimacy threat arose, Project Albion intervened, using surrogates, selective donors, or in some cases, complete substitutions. They ensured the DNA of record always matched the royal profile, even when it didn't by birth. He turned another page. The next entry was dated 1981, the year of his parents' marriage. His stomach twisted as he read it. Contingency 81B enacted per recommendation of Lord Mountbatten's council. Candidate Diana Spencer confirmed for union. Genetic parity verified through secondary donor line. William's throat tightened. The implication was staggering. His mother, the beloved Princess Diana, had been chosen not just for love or duty, but as part of a preordained genetic match. He slammed the book shut, his breath shallow. They turned the monarchy into a breeding project. Simon stepped closer, his face pale. Sir, if this is true, it changes everything. It means the monarchy isn't a lineage at all. It's a construction. William stared at the book, horror and disbelief colliding in his chest. My grandmother knew. She built her entire reign on this secret. Every smile, every speech about duty and legacy. It was all a mask. He turned back to the book and flipped to the final entries. The handwriting grew shakier, older, clearly written in the Queen's final years. One entry stood out, dated just months before her death. Project Albion has ensured the monarchy's survival through deception. Yet the cost has been the truth itself. Should future heirs uncover this record, they must decide whether illusion is a sin or a shield. Beneath it, a final line in smaller handwriting read, To William, you will find this when you are ready. The bloodline is not your burden, but your choice. William's hand trembled as he traced her words. He could feel the weight of her intent. Not cruelty, but desperation. The Queen had carried this secret alone, knowing that one day someone would have to decide whether the crown was worth the lie it was built on. Simon broke the silence. Sir, we have to secure this immediately. If the press gets wind of this, it's over. Not just for the family, for the monarchy itself. But William didn't answer. His eyes were distant, his thoughts racing through generations of deception. He thought of Harry, of how his brother had been mocked, ostracized, hunted by the press. And now he realized, Harry's scandal, his pain, his rebellion. It all stemmed from a truth none of them were supposed to know. They'd both been victims of the same lie. When he finally spoke, his voice was low but steady. Seal the vault again. Nobody outside this room knows this exists. Simon hesitated. And your brother? William looked up slowly. Harry doesn't need